Hi, everyone. So we see people that are now starting to join. We had a little bit of technical difficulties there, but we will get started here in just a moment. So as people continue to log in, we're going to hold for just a moment to give everyone an opportunity to get settled in, get the audio working, and we'll get started here in just about 20 to 30 seconds. So thank you, everyone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. And the way that we're going to start this is I'm going to start by passing it over to Aaron here, who's going to do a quick intro, and then we will get into talking about cyber insurance. So Aaron?
Sure. Okay. It looks like I can't start my video, but it's okay. I'll just go without it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I genuinely appreciate your valuable time. We extend our gratitude to our existing customers for joining us. And for any new customers, allow me to share a little bit about who we are at SNL International. My name is Aaron Arata, and I'm a sales consultant at SNL International, a technology consulting and services company with a strong presence in LA County and Orange County. For an impressive 26 years, we have been passionately providing cutting-edge expertise in systems and network infrastructure, data protection, and data security. What sets us apart is our unwavering commitment to engineering excellence. Our team of highly trained and qualified engineers is the driving force behind our success. Collaborating closely with our clients, we provide cutting-edge solutions that precisely meet their unique needs, fostering long-lasting partnerships built on trust and reliability. We strategically partner with industry-leading companies to ensure our customers receive the optimal solutions tailored to their business objectives. Speaking of a valued industry-leading partnership, we are joined here today with one of our top-tier trusted partners, Arctic Wolf. We have the privilege of hearing from Christopher Fielder, a true expert on cyber insurance. So get ready for an insightful and empowering session ahead. Thank you, and back to you, Christopher.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So appreciate that. As Aaron said, my name is Christopher Fielder. I'm the field CTO here at Arctic Wolf. Let me give you just a quick background on me and kind of what I've done and why I'm kind of approaching this topic. So I've actually been in cybersecurity now for actually we're getting ready to hit 23 years, which makes me feel kind of old, but been doing this my entire career and wide range of capacities, wide range of different industries. I worked for the military, a government agency. I worked a few different organizations that were out there, penetration testing, threat hunting, incident response, all the fun stuff. And now, as the field CTO, I'm in much more of a research role. So doing research into some of the biggest topics and trends and threats that are going on in cybersecurity, really starting to identify, what is happening in the industry and on the threat landscape, and then feeding that data back into Arctic Wolf so we can continue to expand how we approach our customers, what we offer our customers, and really what we feed back into the industry as a whole, because we want to provide good research and good data for the cybersecurity industry. And that's why we're approaching this topic. So one thing we continually hear from customers and really just everyone in the industry is what is going on with cyber insurance? This is not a brand new thing, but we're seeing more and more people turn to cyber insurance, have some difficulties or situations with cyber insurance. So we're going to kind of talk about all that here and just go over kind of the foundations of cybersecurity insurance and what our approach to it is and how generally we recommend overcoming some of these problems and what Arctic Wolf does when it comes to cyber insurance. So let's set some foundational understanding here and talk about, well, why are organizations turning to cyber insurance? And I think that, at a high level, it makes sense, right? Anytime you're concerned about danger or you're concerned about, losing money or coming to harm, whatever it is, then insurance is kind of something that's been there. It's there to protect your house. It's there to protect your car. It's there to protect your health. Sometimes, your pets, like I have pet insurance. So why wouldn't it make sense to say, okay, well, my business needs insurance, and more so, protection from cybersecurity concerns, especially when we look at the current state of what is going on in cybersecurity right now. So recently, we did some research where we talked to 700 plus global IT security leaders. So decision makers, these are VPs, CISOs, or other C-level, CIOs, directors, product owners, anyone that is making the decisions, or I guess we can almost say signing the checks for some of these things. And we ask them a lot of pretty detailed questions about, what do they see for threats? What do they see about their environment? We really want to hear from them, like their position on cybersecurity and what are they looking to do in the future. And we found some interesting things here that we can see as kind of feeding into the overall concept of, cyber insurance. One, 42% of organizations that we spoke with have suffered a ransomware attack in the last 12 months. So let me go back and say that we talked to 700 global security leaders from organizations that had established security programs. So they had SOCs, they had full-time security staff members, they had security programs. In those organizations, 42% of them suffered a ransomware attack. Another 3% said they believe they would have suffered a ransomware attack, but they were able to detect the breach and stop it before it got to the point where it could drop a payload of ransomware that would detonate. So they detected the breach early on and essentially arrested it at that point. So it's safe to say that about 45% of organizations that, have established programs were targeted for ransomware. That's a major concern. That's almost half. So it's very safe to say that, you've got about a 50% chance or more in the future, maybe much more, of being the victim, or at least the attempted victim, of a ransomware attack. 50% of environments detected a breach during the last year. So we said, how many of you, detected a breach in your environment? 50% said they did. Does that mean that 50% did not detect a breach? Absolutely not. That means only 50% detected it. The other 50%, excuse me, did the other 50% not suffer a breach? No, it just means they didn't detect it. Ransomware operators were paid 74% of the time. We asked those victims of ransomware attacks, how many of you paid? 74% of them paid either the full amount or at least a partial amount of the ransom. So 3/4 of the time, almost, these ransomware operators are getting paid, and they're not going to slow down. They're not going to stop. They know that 3/4 of the time they're going to make money. And 48% of the organizations we spoke with are attempting to hire 10 or more people, means they have 10 or more open positions. Again, that's telling us that there just aren't enough people out there to do this work. A lot of these organizations are facing day-to-day problems, vastly understaffed, and putting even more stress on the individuals that are doing the work for them, making them work long hours, making them work holidays and weekends, and really just taking a toll on these organizations or these individuals. And then you suffer burnout, and then you get, churn, and you lose even more people. So it's kind of a vicious cycle. So all this, plus more, is why organizations are saying, I need something to help me here, right? I need essentially a safety net. That safety net that some of them are turning to is cyber insurance. And it's all about managing cyber risk. Here at Arctic Wolf, you may see our tagline quite often is, we want to end cyber risk. And that's an interesting approach to take, right? Because there's a lot of things that you can do with risk. Oh, let me back up here. When it comes to risk, you can avoid risk, right? You can say, you know what, I'm simply going to not, do the dangerous thing. I'm not going to drive 100 miles an hour. I'm not going to jump out of an airplane, or I'm not going to implement that technology into my environment because I think that it's too risky. So you can avoid risk. Or you can mitigate risk. You could try to minimize it. You can say, I'm going to establish a really good patching program, make sure I address all vulnerabilities. This is one of the hardest ones because we all want to try to minimize risk, but do you have the people power? Do you have the time? Do you have the ability to do that? It's a great option if you can do it. Some of them will simply retain the risk, right? In other words, they'll go, you know what, that's the cost of doing business is I have to accept a certain amount of risk. And then others will say, I want to transfer the risk. That is where cyber insurance comes in. That's where they go, okay, I can't bear all this risk myself. I can't carry this burden by myself. I need somebody to help me do it. And cyber insurance is able to come in and say, you can transfer some of that risk to us. We will take some of that risk for a certain amount. They certainly don't do it for free, right? But if it monetarily makes sense to them, they say, we will be willing to take some of that risk. And if there is a problem, we will pay out. Well, here's the interesting thing about, right? When it comes to that, let me get to this. Let me back up here because I want to kind of talk about something here for a minute. And that's where cyber insurance came from. And when we talk about this risk transfer. So when we go out there and talk to individuals about cyber insurance, it's kind of in an interesting place right now where it's not relatively old, right? But it's pretty new in this, grand scheme of things. But when it came onto the scene, a lot of these insurance providers were not fully prepared for what they were going to offer. They essentially saw it as another revenue stream, another way to, offer something to their customers. They were like, well, we are going to offer, oh, sorry about that. They said, we're going to offer business insurance, just like we offer car insurance and medical insurance and everything else. So why don't we offer cyber insurance? Organizations are concerned about their cybersecurity programs. And so they offered this. But when you think about when you're signing up for a policy for, how about your homeowner's policy, you have to go through a pretty rigorous process. At least I did when I got my homeowner's insurance policy. They said, how far are you from a fire hydrant? How far are you from a fire department? Do you have smoke detectors in every room? Do you have fire extinguisher on every floor? Do you have a pool that somebody could, harm themselves in? Do you have anything around your house that somebody could get hurt on? How far are you from a body of water where your house could flood? Again, just a very long list of things that they asked. But when a lot of these organizations that were offering cyber insurance, when they initially started to offer these policies, it was a pretty minimal set of questions. Anecdotally, when we talked to individuals that had some of these early policies, it was basically, do you have a firewall? Do you have antivirus? Okay, then sign here and we will take your premium and thank you for that. But having a firewall and having antivirus is not enough to protect the environment. And these organizations and the cyber insurance providers found that out very quickly because they onboarded customers for cyber insurance. And then these customers started making claims, very large claims. And cyber insurance kind of grew at the same rate almost as ransomware becoming much larger, right? Ransomware was becoming very big. Organizations were very scared of it. So cyber insurance was an option to cover that. And these cyber insurance providers were ended up paying out quite a bit. And all insurance providers are not in the business of losing money. They're not going to just continuously pay out and, be in debt. So then they went, whoa, let's tap the brakes here for a minute and let's address this a different way. This is, we're having a problem here. And now customers or potential customers, even people we just speak with in the industry or I speak with, said they went through a period of very difficult time renewing those policies, very vigorous standards of, well, what do I have to get that policy? What does my stack need to look like? Very long questionnaires that some of you may still have to work through, right? Asking you the ins and outs of your environment to calculate what that premium is going to look like. And even then, you may have a pretty secure environment, and some providers may still charge you quite a bit for that premium because they may still be in the hole or still trying to make some of that money up or still say, you know what, I don't want to take on that much risk. So it can be an interesting thing that's out there that we're still working through. As we monitor this and we continue to do research into this, we're seeing it start to level a little bit. Not quite as difficult as it was a few years ago, but it still presents a challenge. We also found out something else that was interesting, and that's that pretty much every country and every region that's out there right now is in a different place when it comes to where they are with cyber insurance. There's no like global front when it comes to cyber insurance. And I found this out the hard way I was doing research on cyber insurance, and I wanted to do a global perspective of cyber insurance. So we did interviews and research with, globally around the globe, all these different countries, all these different regions, and we collected all this data on where do you stand with cyber insurance? What are you doing right now? What are the requirements? What do your premiums look like? Everything we could find out. And we put all that data together and we tried to analyze it statistically, right? So what does it look like from a global perspective? But we ran into a problem because every country essentially is in a different state of their cyber insurance growth, to where those statistics, when we put them together, essentially didn't represent anybody. And I try to explain it like this to, when I'm saying this, where, okay, you have two people in a class. One person on a test scores 100. The other person scores a 0. So you would say on average, that class scored 50% on that test. Well, that may be mathematically correct, but that 50% does not represent either one of those students. In the same way, when we try to look at cyber insurance from a global perspective, by collecting all this data, putting it together, and then trying to analyze it statistically, it didn't represent any of the countries because they are in such a different space. So when we talk about cyber insurance now, at least from the Arctic Wolf perspective, we primarily talk about it from the North American and really the United States perspective, a lot of Canada as well. But that's because in the research we've done, we may not be entirely leading, the globe when it comes to cyber insurance, but we are certainly one of the leaders. We are in a more mature state, not again the most mature, but certainly in a more mature state, and we are more mature in certain areas. So when I present some of this information coming up, it is going to be from that kind of North American perspective. But okay, so now we're saying, well, we want to get a cyber insurance policy. And how are we going to do that? What do we need to have? Well, there are a few different things that we see on average. They're pretty common for these cyber insurance providers to now say, this is kind of, minimum, what we want you to have in your organization, what you need in order to be insured by us. And they're not even guaranteeing that you're going to get the best premium, but this is kind of, a basic set of, if you don't have these, it's going to be a pretty difficult time getting a policy. First and foremost, we see that it's almost without question, you have to have this, is multi-factor authentication, MFA. So Duo, Okta, whoever it is, you have to have multi-factor authentication, just the standard, put in a password, log in and get access to the environment. It's not going to cut it anymore because of how easily a password can be phished, how easily a password can be guessed, how easily a password can be socially engineered, right? Coming from a background of penetration testing, you'd be surprised, or maybe not surprised, how often all it takes is a phone call and a good story to call somebody up and, in customer service or the warehouse or wherever, and get their password after a 5-minute phone call. Hey, I'm calling up from the help desk. We see some unusual activity on your computer. We just want to make sure that you're not doing anything wrong. I don't want to get your boss involved. Can you just do me a favor? Listen, just give me your password real quick. Let me log in. Okay, yeah, it looks good. All right, thanks. Again, acting under a sense of urgency, having a good story, acting like you have authority, and you're going to get that password. So multi-factor authentication is almost across the board a requirement. And even then, that is not guaranteed security. We're seeing this on a wide basis. There was recently an organization that was compromised through MFA bombing. In other words, sending that push to almost everybody in the organization just to see who would accept it. And we've seen breaches from organizations where, an attacker will send that multi-factor authentication push, Okta, Duo, again, there's many that are out there. And how many times does that happen to you where you may be working on something, you get a ding on your phone, you hit the button because you're so used to it, and then you go right back to work. And it doesn't even register until later that you just let an attacker into your environment. Endpoint detection and response, or some sort of endpoint visibility and endpoint coverage, being able to see what is happening on all the endpoints in your environment, and when a threat is detected, to then respond or take action. Moving beyond just the traditional antivirus, which is, load a bunch of virus definitions and say, hey, stop anything that we know is bad. Moving beyond that, being able to detect almost in real time and then respond in near real time as well. Backups and what the frequency of the backups are. So making sure they're encrypted, making sure they're offline, making sure you test them to make sure they work. And even then, this is one possibility for ransomware, but even then, this isn't entirely going to guarantee that you resolve it, because I'm sure some of you, probably somebody in this discussion, has been in a ransomware situation where you tried to restore from backup and didn't work, because there is some ransomware that will bury into backups and then redetonate. So, or they'll infect the backups, and just encrypt them. So it's good to have, and it's great when it works. But again, that's why they're saying all of these things together. Email filtering and web security. I mean, email filtering is super important right now. Business email compromise and utilization of email from an attack standpoint is a major problem. Patch management. We've seen large scale breaches just across industries from these vulnerabilities and the ones that weren't patched. Think of things like Log4j, Spring4Shell, the Exchange vulnerabilities, things that were pretty devastating. Speaking of that family of like Log4j, that's expected to be a problem for the next 10 years. I've heard people say it's going to be the next Heartbleed, where we could be 10 years away now, and you're still going to see it randomly pop up, and an attacker could still take advantage of it. So, a good patch management program where you're actively trying to stay on top of vulnerabilities and patch them to prevent them being leveraged against you. An incident response plan and testing that plan. Having some sort of a plan for when, something hits the fan, being able to respond to it quickly, being able to take action, and then testing to make sure that plan actually works. It's one thing to have a plan, right? You can plan for anything, but if you haven't tested it to make sure it actually works, then it's just really a piece of paper, right? So what are you going to do when that situation occurs? And then run through it, whether it's a tabletop exercise, whether it's, just a training, whatever it is, make sure that you've ensured that that plan is going to work correctly. Employee training or an awareness program. I talked about this when I said multi-factor authentication and passwords, but every person that has access to your environment is a target, or they can be, because that's, when an attacker wants to get into your environment, whether they're, a real attacker or a penetration tester or whatever, they're first going to see if they can just get in, right? Just same way if you try to attack a house or get into a house, you're going to go around and shake all the doorknobs, see if somebody left the door unlocked, see if somebody left a window open, crawl in, do what you can. But if you can't, what's the next best thing to do? Ask somebody for a key. Try to talk your way in. Try to see if the person on the other side will open the door for you. And that's exactly what attackers do: social engineering and phishing. And the only way to prevent this is to educate your users, to have a good, strong, quality security program. And we're seeing the better the security program, some of these insurance providers are taking note of that and saying, okay, well, what does your employee training program look like? Okay, it's once a year, it's an hour-long video, and then you have them sign a piece of paper. They didn't really learn anything. Oh, it's continual. Oh, okay, well, it's, you're doing phishing simulations, or you're constantly educating them. You have a program where they're learning every time there's a situation or there's something in the news or whatever. Okay, that's much better. Those employees actually know what's going on. So again, it's great to have that, at least at a minimal level, but then building upon it and having a strong program increases what these providers like to see as well. And then service accounts with limited domain privileges. Not everyone should be a domain admin. Not everyone should have, admin level privileges. I think this goes without saying, and service accounts absolutely should be limited to that, especially those accounts that are unmonitored. So these are what are kind of the foundational, hey, I want to get a cyber insurance policy, or my policy was dropped, or, I want to know what's going to get me better premiums in some situations. This is what we're seeing in most cases as being foundational. Have this. And then anything you can add to this that enhances your security posture and your security program, insurance companies love to see that, right? They want to hear that. They want to hear that you have that 24/7, 365 coverage, that you've got a SOC, you've got people that are monitoring in real time. Having the incident response plan is foundational and great, but being able to monitor at all times and respond to it immediately, that's even better. So being able to up level these and add to it is going to only increase your chances of getting getting a policy, getting a good premium, and having really kind of your pick of carriers that are out there. So as I said, concerns and trends in cyber, these are really bothering the cyber insurance carriers, right? Those that are writing the policies. They're like, well, what is, you know, the underwriters are going, well, what are we concerned about? What is scaring us? Why are we thinking that we're going to lose money? And things that we've all heard about. Ransomware. Ransomware is number one. Ransomware is devastating to organizations. Ransomware, the median, we just did some research at Arctic Wolf, our threat intel team, and they found that 50%, excuse me, the median, so kind of like the middle ground across the board for the entry level ransomware demand is $500,000, $500,000. That's kind of the middle ground starting point. And then it goes from there. You know, different industries, the starting point is about $1 million. The highest ransom paid to date is $40 million. $40 million was paid by one organization. And again, the problem with that is it sets the bar. And now these attackers are going to go, hey, you know what? I want to pass that. I want to make even more. So now I'm going to ask for 60. I'm going to ask for 80, and I'm going to see what I can get. So ransomware is a major concern. Supply chain attacks. Hey, you may have a great security program. You may be, you know, fully secure, but I still want to compromise you. I can't get in. How am I going to do it then? I see who else you let in and I compromise them, right? I mean, it's standard. We see it in movies all the time. You know, the Ocean's 11 movies. How do I get in? Well, I sneak in under something else that's allowed into the casino. Same concept. You know, the vendors that you're letting into your environment, the tools that you're installing into your environment, if they have a weakness, well, let's compromise that or let's utilize that, and that allows us access in, or allows the attacker access in. And it's difficult in some situations to detect this because, you know, it's a third-party vendor, it's a third-party resource. It's not something that's technically, quote, yours, but it is in your environment and it can be utilized. SolarWinds was a major example of this when that situation occurred. Data breaches and the cost of those, you know, they can be really high and really devastating. And that's quite a bit of a problem that's out there. And then, you know, war and terrorism right now. This is on everybody's mind, and especially the future and what it looks like. Some of the entities that are involved in this right now are actually in some ways, you know, I don't think I'm saying anything crazy, that they are associated with ransomware or have been. And once that situation, you know, I don't know enough about politics to say what's going on, but I think it's safe to say that money is going to have to be made up, and ransomware is going to not only continue, but there's a high probability of an uptick in it, where again, those entities need to make money back because what is being spent. And yeah, it's something that we all have to unfortunately prepare for. So with that, you know, Arctic Wolf, what do we say that we recommend and we do with our company to kind of help with cyber insurance? It's a question I get quite often because we don't sell a tool at Arctic Wolf. We are a pure dedicated service. So you go, well, how is a service going to help me when it comes to insurability? Well, there's a few different ways that we do that. You know, one is the 24/7 eyes on glass, full security operations delivered as a concierge service. Let me start by saying I'm not a salesperson, so I'm just going to explain what we do to achieve better insurability, but I'm not trying to pitch this. I'm just kind of explaining, you know, this is how we approach it across the board for all of our customers and how we have helped them achieve higher insurability rates and better premiums. And one is just constantly monitoring the environment, looking at all areas of the environment. So we say that we are holistic because we don't say we're just going to focus on the endpoint, you know, or we're just going to focus on the network. We want to see everything. We think that's the only way that you're going to stop attackers. And if you could stop attackers or detect these attacks and these threats quickly, insurance companies want to hear that. So looking at the endpoints, looking at the network, looking at the cloud, looking at, you know, all the log resources that are out there. So doing full log ingestion, looking at behaviors, monitoring multi-factor authentication. Again, anything that's a data point that's out there that can be used to identify a threat, putting all that together and then layering threat intelligence on top of that, building threat intelligence that utilizes all of those data points, so you have high fidelity alerting. That's really important. And again, that's how we're able to detect threats, and insurance companies love hearing that. And I talked about the holistic nature, in other words, looking at everything. Detection, response, and remediation with full IR capabilities, being able to detect the threat anywhere in the environment, or detect the attack, detect ransomware, malware, whatever it may be, and then respond to it near real time. Whether that means, isolating the host, putting that host in lockdown, terminating the connection to that network location, and then remediation, walking you through how to remove it, making sure that you understand how to then not only remove it, but, and I think this is something really important that a lot of not just services, but organizations don't do, but take advantage of the situation and use it as a learning point, right? Every time you suffer a breach or an attack, or you detect a threat, you should then funnel that back into lessons learned and how you're going to use that information to improve your security posture. Every time that you are, detect a threat, or you're compromised or potentially compromised, or you suffer a potential breach, you should essentially work from the standpoint of, okay, now I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again, because let me look at what they utilized. Let me look at my weak points. Let me pivot off of that, and let me now turn that into strengths, right? Let me shore up those weak points, or those holes, to ensure that it doesn't happen again. So, and then the full IR capability, being able to quickly pivot into an incident response scenario when possible. We personally at Arctic Wolf, we existed for 10 plus years without an incident response team, just by doing the full 24/7, 365 coverage and remediation as soon as we detected a threat. But we heard from customers that they said, you know what, we also want that safety net of a full IR team just in the back pocket, just because insurance carriers want to see that as well. So we said, okay, we will offer that. And we brought that to market because, again, if you have 24/7, 365 coverage, you have your own internal SOC, maybe that's great. But being able to layer on top of that, or I guess you would say kind of underneath it as a safety net, the full IR team, or, saying you have an IR retainer, that if a situation occurs, you can quickly get in there and resolve it and restore business continuity. Again, cyber insurance providers want to hear that. And then I mentioned that one, being able to turn every situation that occurs into a plan to proactively, continuously improve your security posture. You're not just static. You're constantly looking for ways to improve. You're constantly looking for ways to evolve and make sure that you're staying ahead of these situations. Again, a great way to ensure not only your own security, but ensure the minimal risk that these insurance providers have to take. And all this is done, both pre and post incident. And I think I talked about most of this, so I'll just kind of go through it quickly. But, we want to look at everything in the environment. We look at everything that we can. I mentioned all these different telemetry sources before, and we think that you should do the same. Anything in your environment that's processing data, utilizing data, saving data, storing data, whatever it may be, it can generate a point of telemetry. If an attacker could utilize it, or if an attacker could maneuver through it, then you should have visibility into it, and you should be looking at it and developing threat detections on top of that. So we take all of that and we funnel it into our OpenXDR architecture, which is our platform. And we think that this is the point where you now build your threat intelligence. Traditionally, a lot of threat intelligence was applied down at those individual telemetry sources, meaning you would have threat intelligence or detections built for the endpoint, and then some that are built for the network, and then some that are built for the cloud. And you can still do that, but you also need to put all that together to get higher fidelity alerting, because rarely will an attack be isolated to just one device or one location, right? An attacker is not going to essentially swim through the network and never touch anything. So why would you want to have network detections that are just, by themselves? Tie those network detections to endpoints, because they're going to traverse through the network to get from endpoint to endpoint. So say, you know what, I see this action on the endpoint, and then this maneuvering through the network, or this traffic, and then touching this endpoint, all that together looks suspicious. That's a detection. Now I need to take action. So again, utilizing all that telemetry in one big location to develop your detections and your threat intel on top of that. And again, our security operations broken down into a few different services. It's the managed detection and response, cloud detection and response for both the infrastructure and SaaS. data exploration. Managed risk is just that proactive, being able to look at vulnerabilities. And the reason I mention that is because we said insurance providers want to see that. They want to see you going through and managing vulnerabilities, being able to prioritize risk, being able to have a patching program that's, in place. Cloud security posture management, actively monitoring your cloud resources. Interesting statistic we found last year was we talked to a lot of organizations, like 700 plus, and Gartner says that over 99% of organizations are using some form of public or private cloud. So statistically, almost everybody. But only 18% in the research we did are using some form of cloud security posture management or active cloud monitoring. That's over 80% that are not actively monitoring and being prepared to respond to incidents in their cloud resources. That's also why we're seeing a large number of incidents involving cloud, whether the attacker is exfiltrating through the cloud or using cloud as ingress or coming into the environment through cloud. And in some situations, we have actually seen full breaches from the initial, entry vector to data exfiltration occurring entirely in the cloud and never touching an endpoint. And if you're focused entirely on just maybe endpoint, hey, I've got an endpoint EDR tool and that's all I need. Absolutely not, because in that situation, that company was compromised start to finish without ever touching a physical endpoint. And the attacker, it was an incident response scenario we did, so they weren't one of our MDR customers, but they weren't even aware of that situation until the data had been exfiltrated and they were then notified of it. So yeah, it absolutely occurs. Managed awareness, I talked before about, these insurance providers want to see the awareness programs. They want to see that the customers are being trained, and not customers, excuse me, they want to see that the users are being trained. Anyone that's, touching a keyboard, anyone that's processing data, anyone that has a password, they want to make sure that those individuals know that they're being targeted, know how they're being targeted, and know how to approach it and respond to it. And then finally, as I mentioned, the incident response plan, or that safety net. And you've heard me use this term concierge. If you've ever heard of Arctic Wolf, you probably heard of us use this term concierge before. Personally, when I came on board, I didn't like it. When I first came on board to Arctic Wolf about 3 years ago, I was talking to a partner of ours and talking about this concierge approach to security. And he said, we have a drinking game here where every time somebody says Arctic Wolf, we take a drink and see if we can make it through the rest of the talk, because we talk about concierge a lot. But the interesting thing about that is we also live by it. We also mean it. Concierge is our way of saying, what do you need? When it comes to security, we're not going to approach it. And we think everyone should take this. So again, I'm just speaking very generally here too. We think everyone should take the approach of not saying, okay, when I talk about security program, I mean this, this, and this, and that's all I'm going to address. Or if you're looking at a service, that service says, okay, our managed detection response covers this and this, and that's all we do. Security is so much more than that, and it's constantly evolving. And so we just use this term concierge to mean, what do you need? What can we do to help you get to that next level of security? It's not something we can just easily define or easily, put down in a small scope. Like if you have your own full scale security center, your own SOC in your organization, you should be able to swipe your badge, look inside, talk to the individuals and say, hey, I need a report on this. I need to understand how we're standing with compliance. I need you to help me develop a report for the board of directors on our security posture. I need some recommendations on what tools we need for the future, whatever it is. And those individuals should say, absolutely, that's my job, security. And that's the same approach we take. We just wrap it up in the word concierge because it's just easier to explain that way. Let me leave you with this, and then I'll open it up to any questions in case anybody has any. But reducing the impact and likelihood of a cyber risk. So taking the approach that we take, we are confident this is the correct approach to take because we have stats to back it up, right? So one is that the average time to identify an intrusion, and this is a well-known stat, you can look it up yourself, but the average time to identify an intrusion is 206 days. We do it in 30 minutes or less. On average, when we look at all the threats that we identify, all the intrusions that we respond to, 30 minutes or less. Now, when I hear 30 minutes or less, I'm old, I think of pizza. It used to be a marketing gimmick where if you didn't get your pizza in 30 minutes or less, it was free. They couldn't make that timeline They were giving away too many free pizzas, so they had to drop that. Now we can detect a threat faster than you can get a pizza in those situations. So we think we're doing something right. 39% of the time, attacks occur after 8 p.m. and before 8 a.m. So this is why it's so important to do that 24/7, 365 coverage, because attackers are going to operate when it's least convenient for you. They're not going to say, hey, listen, I'm going to wait until you've had your coffee and then I'm going to start the attack. No, they're going to wait till you're asleep, and you're asleep on a Christmas Eve or whatever, when it's most inconvenient for you. That's when it's going to occur. 43% of customers have advanced threats in their environment that were missed by their existing security tools that we were able to catch. And we believe that's because of how we apply that intelligence, right? So your security tool is looking for one aspect, maybe it's looking at just the endpoint, or maybe it's looking at just the network. But when we up level it and look at it all in context of each other, then we're able to detect things that they couldn't detect with just minimal telemetry. 43% of the time, there are attacks that are there that weren't detected. 69% of our customers have some sort of personal identifiable information, or PII, that's floating around their environment. 19% of the time, it's a critical exposure, or plain text password, just floating around. They don't even know it's out there. But by scanning, by talking to them, by working with them, we're able to see that and help them shore that up. My experience, sometimes you're surprised with how quickly these things can pop up, or how easily they occur. So for instance, let me just tell you this real quick, then I'll move on. But one of the things I used to love to do was, if you get access into the building, especially after hours, and you want a password, go through all the cubicles, go through all the desks, and just start turning over keyboards. There's a high probability that at some point you're going to see a Post-it note with a password written on it. Sometimes not even under the keyboard. Sometimes it's just stuck straight to the monitor. It happens. Unpatched vulnerabilities, 58% reduction in the time to patch critical vulnerabilities after they've activated Arctic Wolf. And you know why? Because they have somebody on their side. And this just goes back to the fact that it's not about, saying that you're not patching vulnerabilities because you don't want to. It's because you don't have the people power. You don't have the time to really address it the way you need to scan the environment, look for the vulnerabilities, and apply the patches. If you have somebody on your side, whether it's us or whoever it is, if you can expand your team, if you have a service that works with you, then you can cover that area. And then phishing, 80% of customers have phishing activity that's missed by email security, but caught by us, because we look at it in context, right? We look at it in context of everything else that's going on, and we understand what is, going on with the individuals and the behaviors. So with that, tell you what, I think we're getting ready to hit time here soon. I'm going to just go through this very quickly and say one other thing that we offer, and that you may see out there that cyber insurance providers love, is a warranty. So we offer up to $1 million warranty coverage, saying that if there is a breach, if there is a situation, we will cover you. And again, if you're interested in that, you can reach out. We can take that offline. So with that, oh, sorry, that is an incorrect slide. I didn't want to go to that one. How about if I do this? I'm going to go straight here and say, if there are any questions, please feel free to ask. I don't know if any of my co-presenters out there want to come off mute, if they got any questions that came in that we want to address. If not, I think I may have hit time here. So tell you what, since we are kind of at time, I will put this out there that if anyone wants to reach out, you are more than welcome to. You can email me, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to continue the conversation. Or if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them and work with you on that. I appreciate everyone taking the time to join today. I appreciate everyone that listened in. I hope everyone got something out of this. And again, all you have to do is reach out. I'll be at Black Hat as well. So if you see me walking around, come visit at the Arctic Wolf booth. Love to meet everybody. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a good rest of the week coming up, and hope to hear from some of you soon. Thank you all.
And again, just wanted to thank everyone for attending. It was wonderful to have you with us today. We look forward to reaching out to each and every one of you, and we'll be reconnecting soon. As a token of our appreciation, we'll be sending Starbucks gift cards to those of you who stay with us from start to finish. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.